Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hey. Hmm. Wonderful to see you. Hmm. Ah, it's always a happy moment. I hope happy moments. Hmm. You might see who is on the other page if you want. Hmm. Hmm. Well, I hope you're all well or good enough. Ah, hmm. So let your attention start to settle around the space around your body, surface of your body. Noticing the sensations where your sit bones connect with the earth. And just let the attention maybe settle there. Sometimes just shifting the weight back and forth there can help find the kind of alignment, center, where you notice this connection between earth and sky, and receiving that. Noticing any quality of care or kindness, or a kind of it can be a very subtle, quiet tenderness. That might arise as you shift into being with your moment to moment sixth sense door experience as it changes. So sometimes for some people, opening up the attention to include awareness of hearing, and already one might notice soft readiness, just that readiness to experience whatever happens moment by moment with hearing. And noticing that that requires a kind of the soft readiness is like that quiet tenderness or vulnerability. To really be with things just as they are. To receive the vibrations and textures of silence, sounds, just as they're happening and changing. Including our hands, the sensations there. So wherever the attention gets called, anywhere in the hands, settling there. Noticing how actually delicate it is. To notice not with the visual image of hands, of course the visual image will come and go. And then seeing if we can have the awareness, have that felt sense of the sensations. Often there's a wordless gentleness that appears. Or that soft readiness. For the unknown to appear and disappear. Or unknown, known, unknown, known. And hopefully we start to feel less in caught in time, no hurry. Maybe shifting to the movement of our breath at the abdomen. And that soft readiness. Anything can happen. And at times, seeing if you can notice a visual image come and go. And then letting the attention drop in there, the felt sense without the image. With our whole fathom long body. Letting the attention go wherever it's called. Soft readiness. Just being with however the sensations appear, unknown, moment by moment. Not me, not mine, not I. And with thoughts, that soft readiness for any thought to come and go, just as it is. Just like sounds, just like body sensations. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral thoughts. Liking or disliking the thinking may also come and go. Not me, not I, not mine. So being careful to believe the content of the thinking. Just thinking. And emotion. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Just like sounds, body sensation. Fear, joy, compassion, grief, anger, metta, loneliness, peace, Anything can happen moment by moment. Soft readiness. And a quiet tenderness and care as best we can.
Thank you, Michelle.
You couldn't hear my bell?
Mm-mm. So we have some time to take questions. If anyone has any questions about your practice, instructions, um, anything we might be able to support you with, Dhamma related. And the best way to let us know is yes, like there you can like Rob has done, you can raise your hand. So on the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a reactions button, and there's a little thing that says raise your hand, as Rob has done. Hi, Rob. You have a question? Let's see.
Good idea. Oh, you unmuted me. Thank you. Thank you, everybody here, the entire Sangha. So in the last period of time, I've been able to expand some degree of mindfulness beyond formal sitting into when I'm sitting around or walking or doing things that normally I wouldn't have that much mindfulness with. And it started with sounds that the two of you really introduced me to as a sort of neutrally based object of seeing what's going on. And it has expanded to some degree to sight, so that it's not frequent, but it is occasional that I see what we call a tree. And I've noticed parenthetically how much language puts my mind in a box as to what I'm experiencing. A tree. I mean, you experience this brown thing with green, and we call it a tree out of some convention. And so I'm seeing more of what I'm actually seeing. But I've noticed what for me has been a problem come up, which is that some things I either see or hear. If I really am mindful of what is going on, I miss the well, everyone's watching, don't worry about it. If I'm really mindful, I sometimes miss the wonder, I might even say ecstasy, of what I'm encountering. And that could be like a flower. If I see a flower, well, I sometimes am mindful of the shape and the color and the word flower, which diminishes it, I think. But when that happens, like most things that I'm really mindful of, the thoughts don't stay and they go on to something else, or they maybe go back to the flower and I'm mindful again. And what I find is that when I'm mindful that way, both with something like a flower and also with music, listening to Beethoven or the Grateful Dead, both of which have produced in my life a lot of ecstasy, that mindfulness cuts me off from the ecstasy. And it is not particularly unpleasant to me to be mindful of those things. And I liked seeing and hearing being to whatever degree I am mindful, being mindful to that degree. But I miss the non-mindfulness. I miss the ecstasy. And I don't know if this is just my problem or what, but I would appreciate your comments.
You want me to
Michelle, you want to
start?
start? Sure.
Sure. One can go in a lot of different directions with your question, Rob. So, I think that I would encourage you to keep exploring this, like number one, like just keep exploring it and to first off, it's like if you notice ecstasy in general, to notice when there's identification with it, like my ecstasy, and when there could be a possibility of enjoyment when it's not mine. I'm just saying that like in general, that it's interesting to see what happens if one is understanding enjoyment as something that is impermanent and not self, right? Not ours in general, with anything that's pleasant. And then because if we're just seeing something, we're seeing color and form and not necessarily like the word flower or the memory of the word rose or peony or whatever. Bare attention in itself does not necessarily not necessarily stop the pleasantness of it. It wouldn't necessarily. It would, but any kind of identification, so that if you're noticing, seeing, and then there's like a flower and there's a pleasant feeling tone with it, which is in here, yeah, right, it's mental. And then if there's liking of it, that's like this very rich place of practice to notice. And it's going to lead to a question for you at some point when I finish with this, because when we're not mindful, one of the reasons that we like, for example, music, is that there can be a sense of feeling like a separate self, there can be a loss of the experience of feeling like a separate self by actually getting identified with the music. In which case, you would feel then when you have the bare attention and you're listening to the music and there is not an identification with the enjoyment of it, you might miss that sense of union with it. But there can be a deeper kind of contentment that's possible in listening to the music without the that union or oneness with it, by simply noticing the pleasure of it, the bare attention of the pleasure of it. But as you can see from what I'm saying, this requires a certain kind of investigation and not a kind of second guessing of how it might unfold. And I would include in this exploration, and I think I already said it, but I'm going to emphasize it. I would like you to see what it's like to get lost in it with ecstasy and see what that feels like and see if there's an identification, and then see what it's like to not do that, and to see if you can shift. Now, here's the important part. Shift getting lost in the enjoyment or the ecstasy to noticing it with the bare attention, and then seeing if it can switch to mudita, so that you're shifting to appreciating appreciating the joy of it, but that there's a disidentification there. So to shift to mudita requires disidentifying and appreciating the pleasure of it without being identified with it. So it's still a very pleasant experience, but it's not a loss. It's not a loss of self in it in the same way. Meaning that with mudita, of course, with each Brahma Vihara, it's metta, loving kindness is infused with wisdom, and compassion is compassion infused with wisdom, and empathetic joy, mudita, is mudita infused with wisdom. So there's an understanding that that enjoyment isn't yours, or that the pleasant isn't yours. How's that? I'm sure you might have something to say to this, because I've kind of.
Well,
I hope you might have something to say.
no, I got it all.
Yeah.
So when I see that little purple flower, or when I see the Milky Way, or when I hear Beethoven's string quartet or something like that, sometimes it's sort of a regular experience. I enjoy it. I can see it, and I can, and if I'm mindful, the identification slips away, and I can keep on enjoying it. But I'm talking about a sort of more peak experience that I've been lucky enough to have a bunch of times in my life, not through drugs, that it's like it's not that I am identified with it, but the music sort of becomes everything, the universe. And I don't feel separate from it. So maybe that is identification, but I don't feel the I just wow, I can't, it just, that kind of thing. Can't talk about it. And same thing happens if I see a Monet painting. I can look at it, I could just look at it and just feel everything is right in the world. And it's, if I'm thinking about things that are bad in the world, of which there are plenty, I can approach those with mindfulness, because I know I can still do whatever I was going to do, even if I'm not identified with my displeasure with seeing people hungry and things like that. But with this kind of thing, with the beauty of the universe that sometimes just takes over the universe for me, then if I consciously become mindful of what's going on, it diminishes it. And I guess so I understand there's attachment to that, but it's hard for me to want to get rid of that attachment. I don't find it painful. So
Yeah.
I really am confused. I really
Right.
am.
Yeah.
No, I think
That's
say you just took equanimity as understanding that we're taking birth into this vast range of joy and sorrow.
Right.
Vast range. So there's a peak experience of sorrow that, if you're mindful of it, is it diminished? And is a peak experience of joy? And if you're mindful of it, is it diminished? And with equanimity, neither would be diminished.
Well, you say
but
not.
the
Okay, go
I'm
ahead.
just
yeah. I
no,
mean the
because
experience of I mean the ecstasy
can I
is yeah.
can I finish first? Like it's like because with equanimity, there's an unconditional acceptance. So the wisdom part of it is that there's an acceptance of there is an impartiality. There isn't an attachment, right, to the peak of the joy or a repulsion from the peak of the sorrow. So that the peace, the taste of that peace can include that extraordinary beauty without the attachment. It can. That I'm asking you to see if you can explore it more. But it's like if one is lost, if one is attached to that experience, that peak experience, um, that is different than the peace with it. It is different.
You see, but just one comment. I don't want to take up all the time, but if a really peak bad experience is happening, and I bring mindfulness to what's going on in my mind and around me, I notice things arise and pass away. And it diminishes that kind of negative thing. And when I'm meditating or just walking along and it's a beautiful day and there's a breeze on my face, I go and I say, oh, well, that's really pleasant. Let me look at that. And I notice that I don't have to be reliant on that great breeze. It's a beautiful thing when it's there and then it goes away. And so I'm talking about something that is, I understand what you're saying, but I guess it's hard for me to convince myself or to have you convince me that I want to give up. I want to give up listening to a string quartet and feeling like, well, I could die now, everything's perfect. And to give that up seems to talk about it here is because, you know, in the time I have left on this planet, I'd like to keep on walking the path.
And I'm going to stop and let Jesse talk about one more
Okay.
thing. With mudita, there is no need to give it up.
Except that when
Appreciating that would be the ultimate gratitude for that would be everything. You wouldn't want it. You wouldn't want to give it up. You wouldn't want but you would, but there would be gratitude. That's all I'm going to say. Jesse there's a lot of angles into this and it's
yes,
very, very important. Yeah,
I
it's
am
very,
I have a lot of gratitude when those type of things happen. I can tell you that.
I can tell.
I think the universe. Thank you. I do that stuff. Thank you.
Right, right.
You
So
know,
would that mean that anyone's asking you to give that up?
Well, he's saying when he gets mindful of it, it dissipates.
it dissipates.
Right, right.
So yeah, I mean so I mean I oh everything that Michelle said and maybe just like it's a sort of, you know, like saying just another angle on it is in some ways it's like it is why this is such an important question probably actually many angles on that, but one of the reasons is it actually does like parallel precisely a lot of what the Buddha's path was and process of realization was, which is to say, in a somewhat related way, when he decided to go on a spiritual quest and leave the worldly life and try to get enlightened, what he encountered in teachers of that era were people who had a lot of training and different techniques and different skills in kind of some version of what you're describing. One could say that, right? Which is like how to concentrate the mind in a very absorptive way around certain experiences so that you can, and of course, I know the language gets slippery, whether there's identification or not, but this sense of being absorbed in a kind of, like the Jungians would say, the sort of oceanic experience, right? This kind of mystical unity, right? Where the lines between self and object are dissipate and there's a bliss in that, right? And people who had training that the Buddha learned in like incredible refinement of that experience, right? That we can have in different ways to ones that maybe we fall into very naturally, to ones that take like intense amounts of kind of concentration and training over time. And so what's interesting is that like that the Buddha kind of trained in those things and developed those skills and never renounced them, right? Throughout his career, there was an emphasis on the value of that capacity of the mind, of the stabilizing force of that, the beauty of that, the inspirational potential of that, but also that they were not leading to the cessation of suffering, right? That ultimately you could only maintain that for certain periods of time before the conditions change and you're right back to the kind of more normal. And so it isn't to say that they're not valid tools or that they weren't important techniques that he continued to teach and that we still learn these, and we still have as part of the tradition, that are really pre-Buddhist. But this question of what is it that leads to release? And you're having this experience of something that is more that, right? It's like, well, when you bring mindfulness to it, there's a release. There's what is often translated, but it's the positive quality doesn't always come through, is this quality of disenchantment, which is 100% the mechanism of liberation in this practice. And that's precisely what you're describing, right? This thing of like the enchantment with pleasant experience as even wholesome pleasant experience, not just like, oh, it's just greed or it's just wanting. It's like beautiful, the enchantment with it doesn't seduce us. It's not there. Something gets released in this process where the mindfulness is able to sort of show up for these things. And there is a way in which it feels like we're losing something at times, right? There's a way in which it feels like we're either losing ourselves, we're losing the pleasure, we're losing these things that can uplift us. And so I would just say to be careful about worrying about that, because it takes a long time to totally lose it. Even if you don't want to lose it, right? Never mind if you actually did want to lose it. It's like a long process. But also that it's like Michelle is saying, it's like an exploration. Okay, there's a part of feeling something is lost, and then what else is there, right? Just like this, what else is in that space? When you describe it as like it's harder to register as pleasant, but there is something that gets released in that, and there's something in that equanimity, right, that was Michelle also named, that is a different kind of peace, a different kind of stability, a different kind of happiness for the heart. And sometimes we don't recognize it as happiness. We don't recognize it as peaceful, as actually pleasant, because of the kind of somewhat, to some degree, the neutral quality of it. And a part of the practice is just sort of like getting a taste for that. It's like, where does it scare us? Where does it repel us? Where is it something that we have confidence in? Where is it something that's just new and interesting? Where is it something that perhaps over time we actually develop a taste for and even a longing for, that sense of release from the ups and downs, from the convulsions of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. And so, just as Michelle is saying, it's like we don't actually need to let it go. These, are very powerful forces. There is the Brahma Viharas that allow us, a great degree of appreciation of, we're not letting go of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, because those are going to continue to arise in our lives. But there is this question of enchantment and disenchantment that is something that the practice will bring up, and it's reasonable to be ambivalent about it, and it's even more reasonable to just kind of be continuing to build a curious relationship with it, of like, oh, what is this, and then what is, how does that, when we have the more oceanic experience, like, what is, what are we getting from that? What are we losing from it? Again, these are not experiences that the tradition rejects or denies or feels that we shouldn't be using, right? But there is an understanding of the limitation of their usefulness as a tool for liberation, right? That they're there, they're there for a lot of the way. They are useful. And then that there's a certain point at which we need to go beyond them. And that you're, kind of encountering that place in an interesting way, in a very natural way. And it's neat to hear the ways that it's sort of like arising. And it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I don't know, Michelle, anything else you want to add? Or
Just again that it's kind of like what my talk was about last week, which it's like if it's a lot of the heart stretching to include all it, like the heart can include all this, and be able to pull back from the object, right? Like it's like to have that experience that you could die there, to have that peak in experience, and then to be willing to not be attached to it is what it's about. It's not to reject the experience at all, but it's being able to have that impartiality where then it's time to pull back from the object, right? It's like that's the ability to include everything.
I guess I'm having a little bit of a crisis of faith or doubt. That is, I experience after however long I've been meditating, a lot of peace, and both during meditation and not during formal meditation. And some people sort of will define release or awakening or even nirvana as peace. And I really like peace. It's good. It's good. I can, I don't struggle with so many things that I used to struggle with. But boy, I don't want to give up that other stuff. And so that it's really, I'm trying to be honest, that it's a real, I can look at the conflict that I'm going under, but and I will, but to give up the opening notes of Beethoven's 13th quartet would be as something that grips me and has for my entire life. I know you say I can do it, but as Jesse pointed out, when I bring mindfulness, it somewhat dissipates. And I don't want just peace. I want to listen to Beethoven and love it more than anything in the world. So
there's probably a Sufi camp somewhere nearby,
Excuse me?
There's probably a Sufi camp somewhere nearby,
Oh, well, no, don't dismiss me. I'm really serious.
No, I know you're serious, and but I do feel that there is a, like in this Zoom, right? It's like we're not monastics, you know, and that I think what you're describing is something that there's a very shared, I don't want to say ambivalence necessarily, but a complexity around this question of to what degree are we renouncing all that, you know, brings us a certain kinds of pleasure, and to what degree are we sort of trying to negotiate our responsibilities and our enjoyments in life and our this lay person's path, right, of less seclusion, less renunciation, but still try to understand these things about ourselves and understand the dynamics of the heart. And so, you know, there's no, you know, you are responsible to the degree to the pacing of this process, and you will make whatever choices you make around where do you bring mindfulness, where do you maybe start to have some time where you're doing more of the Brahma Viharas, for example, right, as a primary focus of your meditation practice, where it's like you're cultivating the beautiful. When we get sort of scared or repelled by the abyss, you know, that sometimes it is important to just be like, okay, we're going to spend some time not doing as much mindfulness and more of cultivating these beautiful qualities. And so there's tools around that, you know, that still keep us in the sphere of the path and that are working on other aspects of it, right, to kind of help build that sense of confidence and stability of mind and whatever. So, you know, I think that there's times where we make choices like that in order to kind of be able to not believe the doubt too much either, right? To not spiral into, you know, a place of distrust or of making hasty decisions about what kind of where we are on the path. But I also feel that there's something important about what you're asking and about what you're experiencing, and I wouldn't want you to lose that either, right? That some crises are very important and very meaningful, and to not, you know, to stick with the tension that it's bringing up, to me feels like the most important thing. You know, what is freedom and what is happiness? And these are essential questions, and there is no one saying to not do the things, you know, that bring you joy. But when the mind on its own starts finding solace in a different kind of peace, that there might be something worth trusting in that as well. That doesn't always have to feel like it's a loss, but it requires more feeling into it and more willingness to explore, you know.
I had not easy math teachers from fifth grade on, and I think my ear door even shut off when math was, you know, talked about at a certain, probably by sixth grade. But I had to take this senior review math in high school to get in to be allowed to go to college. So a bunch of this, all the same type, were in this course our senior year, and we had this math teacher from Italy. He just moved from Italy to Framingham, Massachusetts, and he came into the room and he put this very complex algebra problem on the board, and all of us looked at each other and rolled our eyes like, oh God, you know, this is going to be a horrible year. And then he turned around from the chalkboard and he went, look at this beautiful problem. Like he was like so excited about it. And just, he kept calling it a beautiful problem all year. And we all transformed. He said he loved it so much. And it's like, we love the practice so much. And so we're going to say, look at this beautiful problem. This is a beautiful problem. This is not a bad problem. This is to encourage you to explore it is our job. The Buddha did not teach that pleasure and pain and neutral were a problem. So other than that,
Surrender.
it's a great exploration, right?
Yes.
Look at this beautiful problem.
Okay. That's from the Italian neighborhood in framing.
Right.
Right.
It's important. So I know we keep going, but I do feel like there is like the it's just, it's important to acknowledge our attachments and not pathologize them and not think that we're evil because of them or that we're therefore not good Buddhists or whatever. It's just like, it's an attack. Like you said, if I can't do this, what's the right? But what if you lost your hearing and you couldn't listen to that, right? And it's like, would you still find meaning in life? Would you still be called to find meaning in life? Would you encounter doubt? Would you encounter depression? Yeah, possibly, I just recently, it's like I play this charango, the stringed instrument, I carve wooden spoons, but in the last months I've had this injury on my left arm and I can't do any of those things. And it's like, it's been such a beautiful of this is like, oh yeah, like here is a way that I bring joy to my life and I bring beauty into my life and meaning and purpose. And there are these things that I enjoy and I can't do them. And that like, is there, what is like what if I could never do them again, right? What if I lost my arms? It's like, yes, okay, right. That's possible. And where is the heart capable of being okay with that? Those are like very meaningful questions. And what is freedom? And what is the highest liberation that's possible of our hearts? And they're very motivating, for the quest. And so I just feel like it's really meaningful doubt and meaningful tension that you're in. So yeah, we honor it for sure.
Thank you, beautiful people.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know, Harry, do you have a question?
Wait a sec, just Patricia did have a question, but next, but I don't know if she disappeared. Patricia, did you disappear? I think you might.
Oh, there she
Oh,
is.
there you are. Okay. Yeah.
I didn't disappear. I was just in hearing this beautiful discussion. I was just remembering being at Spirit Rock for one of the first of my metta retreats, and it was Joseph and Sharon and Kamala, and it was all metta. And they were saying that a lot of that, in some ways, there were some people that didn't think that was a great idea because that wasn't really mindfulness. But it turned out to be, I just did it for 10 days. And one day I'm in the kitchen doing my job and I feel this overwhelming, like heart-opening experience. And I have no idea what it is because I was never paying attention in that way. So I talked to one of the teachers and they said, oh, that sounds like compassion. And I'm looking at this person with just this love. I don't even know this person. So I started to have this idea that this whole idea of practice is about cultivating something that, had I not done that, I would probably not have had that experience. So I should continue to practice to see what happens. And I know that, music carries me away like it does with that gentleman. I mean, and it brings me into places that I think as a kid I cultivated, as going to Chicago Symphony Orchestra and hearing Leonard Bernstein do Peter and the Wolf, I'll never forget it. It's like in there. So I can understand what that feeling is. But when you brought up the idea of, well, what if you couldn't do that anymore? I mean, it really kind of got to me. This idea of wanting something to be different than it is. So I guess I just wondered what you thought about it. I mean, there I am at that one of many of the summer birthday metta retreats, 25, 30 years ago, and just feeling these things that I'd never felt, that I figured had to be because of what I was doing. And yeah, I just wondered what you thought, if I was on the right track.
Do you want to go, Jesse?
Yeah, I mean, the in terms of that particular piece of it, are you saying that like did the compassion, this experience more sort of like kind of over this heart opening, did it happen because you were practicing metta?
Mhm.
Yeah. It certainly, I think, is more likely to happen if you're doing that kind of experience, though, of course, plenty of people go on metta retreats and don't have, it's not like it's you put in your quarters and you get out the song or whatever, necessarily, but but yeah, I mean, I think there is a sense of cultivation of that. And I do think it's this sense of like which sense door is something that's can be very evocative to us in these beautiful ways, that yeah, are there ways that we cultivate a relationship of something really beautiful through sound, through music, through visual field, through whatever over our lifetimes, and that those can be doorways into something, in a different way, when it comes to a spiritual practice. I think, yeah, absolutely. The mystery of where we're vulnerable to the beauty, in life is a wonderful mystery, and I also, actually Michelle and I just yesterday we were speaking about Helen Keller, right? And like just amazing, right? On so many levels, but on one of them of just like someone who, never had any experience on like really powerful sense doors, right? That many of us are accustomed to and maybe take for granted, and yet had an incredibly rich life, incredible appreciation for life, incredible capacity of the heart, and certainly her own experiences of profundity, joy and sorrow and whatever else might have been available. So it's like, yes, there's also the sense of these things are capacities of the heart. The beauty of that is actually also not the notion that it's unconditional is important, right? That it actually isn't dependent upon conditions. We may tend to experience it with certain kinds of conditions at certain sense doors,
Mhm.
but that joy, that connection, those experiences of beautiful qualities of heart and mind actually are ultimately can be unconditional experiences is really important to remember.
Mm. I think the idea just came into me that was a gift. That's, looking at it as not necessarily something I did, but some gift that I was able to receive that's maybe there all the time. But somehow I made myself open enough to actually feel it, or
You accessed it. You accessed it. It's an accessing of it. Yeah, you just. I want to just not to forget that when we talk about the Brahma Viharas, often people don't think of them as mindfulness. So it's like compassion is mindfulness of pain and caring about it. So we don't leave, please, 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 please don't leave the mindfulness part of it out. Like mudita is mindfulness of joy and appreciating it, right?
I know that.
right? So, and it's like, yeah, like you cultivation is everything, but it's not always predictable. So you might have 10 days later had that experience.
Mhm.
But there is a cause and effect, and the you just don't always see it linear in a linear fashion, but it is the ability. It's totally like planting a garden.
Mhm.
And the sun and the rain and the kind of soil and the conditions all are changing, but then at some point, sometimes you get a flower. And the same with the loving kindness practice and all of this stuff. It's like you practice and you can't make any of it happen. You can't make, even when you listen to Beethoven, that peak experience happen, right? Like it's like you can't make any of this happen. But you punch in and punch out. Punch in and punch out.
Yeah.
And the access, yeah, you had sometimes we call those glimpses what
Mhm.
you experience. It's a glimpse of something very important, very, very important.
Yeah, I thought I had another one there, just picking a plum in the parking lot of a tree there. I felt like time stopped and I had no idea what was going on. And same thing, it was before the retreat even started. And I talked to one of the teachers there. He said, "Oh, you're lucky. You had a such and such. You had a glimpse." And there was no rhyme or reason to it, why it came. Yeah, I feel like it was a gift.
It's all a gift.
Mhm. Thank you. You guys are gifts, all of you. Appreciate it.
Now,
Harry?
Harry.
Oh, you're muted there.
Unmute. There we go. Yeah, I can really relate to this. Um, whether it be music, it could be the Grateful Dead, it could be Shostakovich, it could be anything. It could be the flower I saw on Mauna Kea Street, to varying degrees of ecstasy, which I really like. And what helps me, and it helps me deal with that, and kind of points me towards more, and it feels like more at this point in my life, at least, is watching it go away. If I can, like if I'm watching the water off Makapu'u and I see the light on the water and I'm just absorbed in that. And then as the sun goes down, watching my process as I know, hanging on, pulling, watching that process feels both a way of dealing with incorporating that ecstasy into my life and furthering my practice. It's none of us would be on this Zoom if we were in a ecstatic state at this point. Maybe for some people it is, but it ends. It ends, and I guess that's what you were saying about the Buddha. You want to find ways of dealing with that, and so bringing mindfulness to the process of coming down from whatever ecstatic experience has been a valuable tool for me, and actually a life-saving one, because there's a Jungian guy, Leland Roloff, used to teach in Chicago, and I remember him saying, and it's kind of related, he says, go to the carnival but come home. And there was a tendency in my life where I didn't want to come home and I wanted to hang on to that. And so it's in that I could see the suffering, and then, yada, yada.
Yeah, but I think that what you're describing is actually, again, it's like a mirror of that classical use that the Buddha described of some of these states of this kind of deeper engrossment, that that if you do the sort of more absorptive concentration stuff, you know, that point is actually letting it go and then bringing mindfulness to watch that mind state dissipate. I mean, that actually is the kind of how that training works, right? Is to stabilize that which the kind of insight from watching the instability of the mind state, and the conditioned experience and then conditioned nature of the mind state, you know. And so, yeah, you know, it's very similar to how it's really kind of described classically and kind of technically, you know, how to make use of some of those experiences.
Mm. Some people are so shut down they don't get to experience joy.
I know.
So that
Right.
that's
Yeah.
like it's like being able to bear this range of pleasure, pain, neutral, and to accept the impermanence of it is the whole, you know, wisdom process of understanding karma and living it out. And everyone has a different, their particular way of having to go through this, but it's what we're all sharing and describing is how liberation happens.
It's been a
And it,
great gift.
yeah. For some people, opening to pleasure makes possible opening to pain, for example. And so that the pacing of feeling the pleasure is actually has to be slow enough to be able to bear the pain. So it's all, you know, we have to remember that the opening process is powerful, but the strength of the wisdom practice and the Brahma Vihara practice is what allows it's open and strong, not just open. And that is requires great cultivation. Great cultivation. Yeah. Not easy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Tim.
Tim.
What's coming up for me in this is a talk that Michele gave a number of years ago. And for me, it was important because it was the distinction between what I think of as kind of the very bloodless, clinical use of mindfulness. The story is Michele, I guess, was standing on the front lawn of IMS, and it was just this gorgeous sunset. And another staff member came up and stood beside her. And I guess, Michele, do you remember this? Do you know what I'm going to say?
I even remember who it is, which is, you know, I'm
Oh,
72.
okay.
So yeah, keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, Michele turned and said something like, "Isn't this a beautiful sunset?" And he said something like, "Well, it's just rays of light hitting the optic nerve." And that for me was the polarity between these possibilities. And what I took from the talk from Michele was being moved by a beautiful sunset is a good thing. That's a good thing if you feel that. And that's really all that I have to say. But this was just coming up for me, what is the right word? The distinction between allowing one's heart and one's emotions to be moved by something, and then it's just rays of light hitting the optic nerve, which to me is a kind of death, and which I guess for Michele was a kind of death at the time.
Yeah.
I was standing at the rim of the Grand Canyon, having hiked up and just watching the sunset. And this guy and his wife were standing next to me, and he said to his wife, "You dragged me 2,000 miles to look at this
For
goddamn."
this. Yeah.
there's no point in rejecting this. The Buddha did not teach rejecting pleasure, pain, or neutral, and that's what's so interesting. It's like that's what's diminishing, but it's allowing that it all changes, right? And how it's that exploration of how we're relating to it that matters. But yes, I think that talk got me in trouble right from the beginning. Yeah.
I mean, it is not to say that it's wrong to experience them as rays of light,
Right,
hitting
right.
the optic nerve or
Yeah.
whatever. That's not like we're gonna find out who that yogi was and judge them, But
I've already done it. Don't worry.
yeah,
Taken care of.
sacrifice for the rest of us. Thanks.
What I'm
but no,
understanding.
but it's like you can tell that in the tone, right, that there is a judgment of that perspective on the more, like evocative, emotionally connected experience, and that's also not, incorrect, right? So the sense of, both can be true, and that why does one need to bury the other one?
Well, I suppose, I mean, trying to summarize this in my own mind, the only problem in all of this would be if every night I went out to the front lawn and wanted to be moved, was attached to being moved,
right,
and then was disappointed, right? That would not be skillful. But beyond that, to allow one's heart to be touched is good.
Right.
It's not bad.
Well said.
Right. And if it's numb, that's okay, right? Or someone else is numb or somebody. I think that what's so hard for Homo sapiens is to allow difference.
Oh, in other words,
and change.
I'm not moved and you're moved, and one of us has got to be wrong, right?
Right, right. That's the
Yeah.
issue. Yeah.
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 Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
Maybe one last one, Helen.
Hi, I just have a quick story to tell you about my very first retreat. I spent the weekend in a tent in pouring rain the whole time. And it was a year when the tent caterpillars were really abundant. So every night I would go to my tent and I would have to shovel the tent caterpillars off. And it was just grim. And the last day of the retreat, I was out doing a walking meditation under cover because it was just pouring rain. And I looked to the side of me and I saw a tent caterpillar, and for just a nanosecond, he was velvet and he was covered in diamonds. And as soon as I saw it that way, it was gone. It was just like so brief. But because it was my first retreat, I had been so like shaky, like, I don't want to do this. Why would anybody do this? But that tiny moment was grace. I'm sure it was, because I've kept going since then. It was enough. It was enough. So I think there's some grace involved. Like we're here and liberation is our goal, but it's also our gift. And if we get too far off the path, we're given something to bring us back. I believe that. I may be wrong, but that's what I believe. So thank you for
So
showing
great.
me the way.
Yeah. It is amazing those experiences, that happen, and sometimes it's just enough, right? Yeah, like you're saying, to keep us on the path, keep us with a sense of faith that it's like, all right, there's something more.
Much bigger than I can comprehend.
Right.
This has been great today. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Really wonderful story. Oh, there's Michelle's.
I've lost my picture, but I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah, we see your drawing of yourself, your grouchy
Oh.
yogi.
My masterpiece. I don't know what happened, but
I
interesting.
can here. I I just pressed the button.
Oh,
As it
thank you.
asks to start video. How about that? All right.
I pressed it, but it didn't do anything. I'm afraid to do anything else because I'll lose the audio probably. So how's this?
Good.
Huh. Well,
You're good. You're good.
yeah. Okay.
Mm, thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
Take care of yourselves. We will see you next Sunday.
Mm.